and on the go on your mobile phone. We're the internet's best choice.
Vibes and Vinyl is here every Friday live at 8 p.m. on iLiveRadio.com. Formerly of Toronto's FM radio airwaves, DJs Gene King and Ray Prasad are in the house once again to continue their tradition, promoting great house music to the world. You will hear exclusive releases and sometimes traveling back in time via some of the best disco, soul, funk, and house. So keep it locked and enjoy the ride. DJs Gene King and Ray Prasad have provided their listeners since 1996. Vibes and Vinyl in your face.
Dilla 10. iLive will be streaming from Brims Wednesday, February 10th at 6 p.m. There'll be giveaways, live DJs, and live performances. Space is limited, so arrive early. Brims is located at 311A Queen Street West in Toronto. This event will be streamed on iLive Radio and is sponsored by Digital Preservation. iLive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio.
Join me, Patrick O'Morris, for the Patrick O'Morris Show right here on iLive Web Radio, Sunday afternoons from 2 to 3 p.m.
Hey, what about me?
Naida, hi.
Hi.
Who let you in the studio?
You're trying to record without me?
Okay, let me try this one more time since you're here. Join me, Patrick O'Morris, for the Patrick O'Morris Show right here on iLive Web Radio with my co-host, Naila T.
Hello. See you next Sunday, 2 to 3 p.m.
This is John Brodsky. If I'm not snapping necks, cashing checks, wearing the large specs, I'm tuned into iLive Radio.
10 years ago, we lost the light of James Dwight Yancey. 10 years ago, we lost the great Jay Dilla. iLive Radio celebrates his life, his work, and his influence. On Wednesday, February the 10th, we bring you Dilla 10. 24 hours of Jay Dilla, commencing at midday. Tune in to www.iliveradio.com, changing the way you listen to radio.
You're listening to iLive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio. iLive Radio.
Welcome to the show, everyone. This week I'm flying solo. Naila is not able to be on the show with me this week, but I do welcome my special guest, Derek Williams. Hi, Derek.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. You got to speak right into the mic.
Yes.
This week we're talking about Black History Month. Now, I did put some posts out on Facebook and Twitter, and I got some feedback from a lot of different people. And I was asking the question, what is really the relevance of Black History Month? Should it be something that in 2016 that we are really celebrating? Would it be more effective if Black History Month was kind of incorporated into world history that the school curriculum should be teaching to everybody? Does it make sense for us to kind of segregate ourselves into this 1 month and it seems to be a day that kids come home from school and say they had some jerk chicken from a Jamaican kid who brought it, what's the focus? And so we're going to talk a little bit about Black history and the relevance of it, and Derek's going to share a little bit with us about some historical stuff that may not necessarily be taught in mainstream. So Derek, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you.
You have an extensive background and a lot of research that you've done. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your history on how you sort of did a lot of this digging that you did.
Yes, well, it actually started at York University, pursuing a degree in sociology and Caribbean history. I ended up in an issue with an immigration officer that really set me on a path when he told me that his forefathers, and that was at one of the Niagara border. And I went on a path then in regards to history, like scholars like Dr. Yosef Ben-Yochanan, Dr. John Henry Clark, Shikanta Diop, Francis Welsing. I was just like building my library extensive after that sort of dialogue with the immigration officer.
So this immigration officer put you on this path that you decided that you needed to get a little bit more acquainted with Black history.
With who I am, of course.
Okay. And when you were doing that research, what were some of the things that really stuck out to you?
What stuck out actually is the fact that what we learned in school, anything with Caribbean history, African history, it was far from it. I mean, when you go to university, you should really study about the universe. And what I realized, what was called Black history is really the missing pages of world history. And that basically was a shock in regards to who built the pyramids from Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, the Sphinx of Giza that was named by the Greeks, and the Pythagoras theorem that Pythagoras went down into Egypt to study. So there was a host of information that stuck out for me.
So in this research that you were doing, was there any particular reason that sort of showed up that you started to see any kind of pattern as to why these pages were missing?
Yeah, I saw a pattern. Actually, I read a book, Ruins of Empire by Count Volney, and Count Volney was present with Napoleon Bonaparte when they actually entered Egypt. When Count Volney came to the Americas and saw missing pages in his book, he had to recall all his books. So the very information that had put Africa as the mother of Western civilization and civilization, those pages were extracted.
So the original book that he wrote,
that's right,
when it was published in North America, pages were removed.
Literally removed.
Wow. And so when he recalled the books?
He recalled the books, and we go right back to 1966 when Sheikh Anta Diop and Obenga went to UNESCO, and they basically shattered a lot of myth regarding Africans having no history.
Okay. Now, what has been some of the impact with this, these pages missing from Black history?
It's an incredible impact that it had on us. Dr. John Henrik Clarke motif is that history is a clock that people must use to tell their political and cultural time of the day. It could be used as a compass for people to find themselves on a map of human geography. History tells the people where they have been, what they have been, and who they are. And most important, an understanding of history tells the people where they still must go. So just imagine if you don't have the history, the impact that is actually made. And Carter G. Woodson, he left a quote because this whole February month basically came because of Carter G. Woodson. I mean, Frederick Douglass' birthday and Abraham Lincoln, even though Abraham Lincoln himself was a slave, quote-unquote slave owner. But Carter G. Woodson gives the answer, and he says, if a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. The American Indian left no continuous record. I wonder why. The Hebrew keenly appreciated the value of tradition, as is attested by the Bible. In spite of the worldwide persecution, therefore, he is a great factor in our civilization, speaking about the Hebrew. And basically, yes, we would be exterminated. We become the last of the last class, as sociology would say. The bourgeoisie owns the means of production. The proletariat sells his or her labor. And then you have the last of the last class, the lumpen proletariat. That is what we would become if we don't actually stick to our history.
But a lot of people would say, if some of the comments I got was that, this is 2016. All this stuff, slavery and, all the stuff that happened to the Black community was so long ago. This is a new era. Why don't we just move on? Is it why is it so relevant still? Can't you guys just get over it,
Yeah, to suffer historical amnesia is like saying to someone, someone who has a biological mother and don't know. Is it relevant for that person to know his or her biological mother? Right, and of course it's relevant for the person to know his or her biological mother. So the thing is, culture and religion, they are vehicles, and it is a service to the people. And we could actually look around us to different ethnic groups and realize that they don't part with their religion and culture. And we can see where they are on a stratification level.
All right, let's take this, let's go back in time a little bit, because I know we were talking before, and we were talking about the slave trade, and that there's a lot of people who say that, the slave trade wasn't something that was started by the Europeans, that it existed throughout the continent of Africa beforehand, and that, it may not necessarily be what we think of it. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that for us.
Well, going back, we have to look at the fall of Rome. And I think this is why we so need the time to look at African history in its chronological order. Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome. Rome was in control. Rome went into Egypt maybe around 47 BCE. But when Rome got to its fall, by the 14th century, Rome was basically broken. They were blocked from the Mediterranean Sea. They could not travel. The blacks, the Africans who ruled Spain from the 7th century to the 14th century, they controlled. And they controlled half of Spain. And it's at that time when the desperation of Europe in taking the information that the Moors, who came from Morocco, who were Africans, right, they had that, and it's until Isabella and Ferdinand pushed these Africans back and pushed the Jews out of Spain. Then the European now, in his desperate mode, will get a lot of information in regards to longitude and latitude, the sailing of ships, taking the gunpowder, making the musket gun, and then we could start entering the discussion with the slave trade.
So, but then who started the slave trade?
Right. So Portugal in the 14th century, when they went in, as I said, the Mediterranean is blocked. Europe is broke. They got nothing. Right. American Constitution went 1776. So everything is just dormant. Africa is in the height of the civilization. Ghana, Mali, and Songhai is now actually declining because of Islamic powers. When Portugal went into West Africa, they're looking for a king to assist them so that they can actually get a route within the Mediterranean so they can start trading. Because Europe just came out of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. And when the Africans, with their inland war at that time, because they were devastated by internal conflicts, and they had servitude going. And their servitude, they asked Portugal, with the big ships at that time, to start taking some of their servitude workers upstream, etc.
So what's the difference between servitude and a slave?
Servitude, you still could actually, you have a period in time to work, 7 to 10 years, tending to cattle and to the land, etc. You still have a right to your name, your culture, your religion. Chattel slavery, which was never heard of, actually, within the world in itself, is what the Europeans brought up and brought on us as a people.
Chattel slavery?
Chattel slavery, which means chattel. You are not a human, you are property, etc.
Ah, okay. So the form of slavery that existed before was more servitude.
It's more servitude, yeah.
Which is so why would somebody sort of enter into that situation, into servitude? Would it be like to pay off a debt or?
Yes, and it would be various reasons. Debt would be certainly one. Prisoners could be another. And
so it was for a set period of time, and then once that time expired, then you could go on and lead your own life.
Yep. It's just like after slavery was abolished in Jamaica and Trinidad and those places, you brought the Kulik laborers in, the Indians in, as servitude workers to work 7 to 10 years, etc.
Okay. And so the shift from servitude to chattel slavery, that happens when you were saying that the Spaniards?
Yeah, that shift basically, 1690, if we talk about American servitude in 1619 when the first 20 Africans reach into Virginia, what is happening there? That servitude, that's basically Indians and whites in servitude. That's within the America.
So there were predominantly Indians and whites that were in servitude.
They were the ones who were in servitude
Americas.
in America when you talk 1619.
Okay, and so this was before actual black slavery started.
Yes, well, it's happening in the
Americas.
Caribbean. It's that I'm talking America, Virginia.
Yeah.
But within the Caribbean, we have Haiti and Jamaica in slavery itself. In Haiti and Jamaica.
Okay. And so in the Americas, where there was servitude, and then there was a transition into chattel slavery.
Yeah, because what happened is that Britain himself, they have to actually be changing, constantly changing their whole aspect of things, and now they're moving into this whole idea of owning the person and dehumanizing the individuals, and that is a topic by itself. When, as I said, Portugal got the illusion when they saw our inland conflict in West Africa of servitude, and that is when Portugal basically went into specific deals with certain kings.
Okay. So that's the shift that happened when chattel slavery started. And what was the I guess the main reason as to why this was something that became so big?
Sugar sold for more than gold. At that time, sugar sold for more than gold.
Sugar was more expensive than gold.
Yeah, sugar sold for more than gold. And they tried out plantations in Brazil. The capitalist system was really waiting to take off because you move from different modes of production. From hunting and gathering to from horticulture to agrarian society. You're just moving up to the Industrial Revolution. So capital basically was built on the backs of Africans. So I think it's a change in the mode of production that brought this, of course.
Okay. When slavery really took hold in the Americas and then throughout the Caribbean, like I said earlier, a lot of people say, it's so long ago, just let it go, let's move on. What are some of the things today that we can look at that we can say is a result of what happened, in the Americas when slavery was happening?
Yeah,
because a lot of people say, that there are direct links, and then there are a lot of people who are saying, you know what, no, there's not direct links. Forget about it, move on. It's old history. Every other culture has been through some form of slavery at one time or another, or something like that. Are there any things that we could look at today in our society today to say, those are direct impacts?
The impact. You look at the ambition, you look at economics, and the collective life of a people, and you wonder why. And that is the impact of slavery. Just look at the economics, look at the collectivity, look at how we manage our community fiscally. And we would see the impact. We had Black Wall Street that was basically demolished and burnt to the ground. These were black lawyers. These were individuals who knew their history and had great ambition to stand, because they knew that the first university was in Timbuktu before there was any university in Europe. Just having this on your mind gives you ambition and drive.
For those people who may be listening who may not be aware, what was Black Wall Street?
Black Wall Street, basically, you have it's a community of individuals who would actually do trading, empower businessmen, just work together in a collective way, and they were thriving very well until the West, with the hegemonic aspect of the Ku Klux Klan, basically had to disempower that fast-growing group. It was the same mentality in regards to us not being granted acres and a mule, and not getting it to become a competitor, because the Kulak laborers had to be brought in to do the business, basically, and to run anything with entrepreneurship, while the blacks stay beneath.
When slavery ended, and so yesterday there was this massive population of individuals who were considered property, and then today, they're no longer property. What was, how did that work? Was there any kind of safety net that was provided to the people? Were there any kind of counseling provided to anybody? Was there any kind of, restitution or anything that was offered to those individuals at the time?
There was nothing. The government had failed and the church had failed also. It's only the Quakers who stood up at the end of slavery. If you realize Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman, it would be the Quaker that would be the only religious organization at the end of slavery stood up to give some type of support. All other religious institutions thought that it was the right of God to allow Africans in that position.
So that's one thing I did want to touch on as well is the whole religious piece, because something you had said that Christianity had a role to play with slavery.
Actually, they were the main individuals, actually the main institution, I should say, who played that role. The Pope gave Portugal and Spain a document called the Isientos to start enslaving individuals. No other European country could not just go into Africa. They had to actually go, quote-unquote, black market, to steal blacks against the market. But it's only Portugal and Spain. They got the document, the Isientos, so that they can enslave African people. So religion played a major role in doing that. Actually, the Curse of Ham story, the interpretation of the Catholic Church with the Curse of Ham and why blacks should have been reduced into slavery had played a great role.
Do you know much about that? You could explain that?
Well, the curse in the 2nd century BC, what you had specific writings from the Babylonian Talmud and other ancient writings that reached into the hands of specific groups. When it was actually pushed to the Pope regarding who Africans were, it is clearly written in one of their Babylonian Talmud, we are cursed because we looked on our father's nakedness. Our hair became kinky, our lips became thick, etc. Our privates became elongated, etc. And because of that, those are the people that is fitting. It's just like Eric Williams wrote in his book, Capitalism and Slavery. If you read the first 3 chapters, they needed a race robust and strong to handle the June sun, because we know that the Aborigines who were here, they were dying out, even in the Caribbean, from different type of diseases, etc.
Well, yeah, because they smallpox and so many other diseases that they didn't have any immunity to, that definitely went a long way to decimating them. So I think that's kind of hard to believe, and I think a lot of people might find it hard to believe that the church had sanctioned this.
Well, when I was at York University, they were using just excerpts from Capitalism and Slavery. Eric Williams, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, ran Trinidad for 30 years, a country actually I'm proud of India, even though Gavi say, why set up an island when there's a continent? So I do love Africa big time. But when I said in that class, I remember clearly stating that it was the church who actually initiated and sanctioned that very act of the African slave trade. I remember a student who was Catholic yelling and being very angry, and it's not until she left the class, then the TA agreed that it's the truth. Because he was giving information from that book, Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams. They still use it in universities today. Even though they wouldn't use the book, they're going to just take certain paragraphs from the book. Yeah.
So there's missing pages.
Missing pages again. Yeah.
I know. Well, Christianity was definitely something that was provided to or offered to slaves. And has there been an impact in regards to that? Like before, you were talking about, every culture has retained their religion, and that definitely plays a factor in how they view themselves. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. While Christianity should be respected to a great degree, because I see Christianity as coming out from Africa, from the Coptics, being started with two black men called Pontius and Boetius. However, when it was given into the hands of Europe, they mismanaged Christianity. They formulated books like in the Council of Nice in 325 AD. They formulated their book. They took our information and formulated European Christianity. So a distinction should be made with European Christianity, which is what most people are functioning on. All churches, Seventh Adventist, Pentecostal, name every Protestant church. They started in the 18th century. We knew nothing of it. It is in this new world that this was introduced to us, and it caused a fragmentation to present in regards to where we would actually now had reach as a collective people.
What were some of the key, I guess, factors as to what led up to the abolishment of slavery?
The North basically, the winters. Just imagine if you're a quote unquote slave owner, and you're spending money on that individual who you call a slave during the winter months.
You're not getting any productivity.
No, so they're spending on them. And this is why they got to really speed up the Industrial Revolution now, because they worked for 400 years already, so it was time to end slavery. And the northern states knew that. The southern states, they got more out of the African. So while the southern states were saying to Abraham Lincoln, don't stop slavery, the northern states were saying, we are not making the money on these individuals. So now America is in a bind.
This was more of an economic thing.
Yeah, of course it was. And it started as an economic thing and then moved to oppression and racism, etc.
But I think there are a lot of people who kind of view slavery, the abolishment of slavery, as not about economics. It's about freedom of the people.
Yeah, well, I mean, each will have their own ideology. But when we visit America, if you even look to the back of the American dollar, written in Latin, Annuit Quiptos Novus Ordo Seclorum, announcing the birth of the New World Order, it is about the dollar. It is about, and we could look presently from Trinidad. Trinidad is an oil-producing country, very rich. Why most of the capital? Why you are in debt to the IMF? Why Jamaica is in debt to the IMF and they're rich in bauxite? Why are they still paying back? So the thing is, no one could run from capital. Walter Rodney, they killed Walter Rodney in Guyana in the 80s. And he was a genius. He wrote a book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. So if any scholar has argued the point, they would have to argue with those scholars who understood perfectly the economics and the whole idea of capitalism and slavery, the thesis of Dr. Eric Williams.
Okay, so every year, February, Black History Month, Canada, the U.S., we hear a lot about these inventors, these black individuals who invented this, who invented that. Without them, all these different inventions wouldn't exist. But we don't hear very much about those missing pages. Maybe we could talk a little bit about why it is that those pages continue to be missing.
Yeah, the pages is actually missing and has gone missing because you have a people who started world history. And if you were to speak, or if the hegemonic society is to speak the truth.
Yeah, when you say hegemonic society, what do you mean?
A society where people who control other peoples.
Okay. So this would be the one percenters. Okay.
So we know exactly the type of oppression that comes when one dominant group sees another group thriving. Take, for instance, Zaire. Mm-hmm. You have Zaire rich in uranium, and in the 14th century there, you have the Western world who is broke because they came out of the Ice Age. They're broke, they got nothing. They need the capital. So what you would do, you're going to empty Zaire of the uranium. Mm-hmm. You got to kill Lumumba. You got to burn him in sulfuric acid. You got to actually, and right after the slave trade was ended basically, you have a conference in Germany from 1884 to 1886 called the Berlin Conference. You have to divide up Africa because they're still richest today, richest in raw material point infrastructure, but still the richest. So what they did now in 1884 to 1886, that was after 1868, after slavery was abolished in America. They divided up Africa, and every European country got piece of Africa and colonized it. I wonder why. Senegal, basically, that's why they would speak French today. That's why the Ghanaian are going to speak English, etc. Why are they doing that? Are we pretending that we don't know? Yeah, it's like they're doing it based on capital. Right.
So all of this was driven by money.
All is driven by the junkie mentality of that crave for that capital.
And so teaching about this within the education system, that would be something, I guess, that would be a little bit dangerous.
You would have to change it. It's just like religion. Religion start all their theory through Greeks. And academia start all their theory through Greeks also. They would never go back to Egypt. We have been not only our land has been colonized, our minds has been colonized also. You would have to give the exact individuals, not Pythagoras, you'll have to give the exact black individual who is responsible for the theorem. George D.M. James came up to the Americas and was a professor in one of their universities out there. And when he wrote the book Stone Legacy, basically he died because of that book. And when the truth is exposed, and this is what I'm saying, you would have to dismantle basically the entire curriculum and educational system if you were to say that the first pharaoh was a black man, mathematics, and all those type of discipline. This is why the European had to name and rename. Even Africa, we don't know the name Africa. They named it Africa. One of the names was Al-Kebulan. We don't know the name Egypt. They named it Egypt. One of the names was Kemet. So they renamed everything. And why? For people that you are dominating and controlling to be lost so that they would not have no collectivity. Look at, my name is Williams, Derek Williams. Hope to change it one day. Over 40 forts in Ghana, Williams owned one. 40 forts. And when Christopher Columbus sailed in 1492, 10 years prior to that, 1482, the fort of Elmina is already built. Long-term planners. We did not finance and organize the slave trade. The slave trade was financed and organized and well-planned. There's a justification, and you find a lot of, even our own people sometimes go around saying, black people sold each other into slavery. No, let's talk from the macro perspective. Who financed and organized slavery? And this is why we are so fragmented, because we have lost our history. And because we lost this history, we are functioning as individuals. But we came from a collective society. Mm-hmm. They came from an individual society. The Ice Age is about individualism, competitive behavior, and egocentrism.
Okay, so we live in the city of Toronto, which is said to be one of the most multicultural cities on the planet, wherein there's a mix of cultures, and there's quite a lot of blending of cultures that's happening within the city of Toronto and throughout Canada. And so you have a lot of, when I say blending, I mean a lot of mixed children who are coming up. Why would this be relevant to them? Because someone of mixed descent, they would be able to have some culture, some history that they could look at and kind of claim their own. Why, for my children who are born today, why would it be important for them to be able to look back and, in the society that we're living in?
Okay, it's relevant because in the end, the very government will compartmentalize who they are. That's why sociology has something called a subculture. Mm-hmm. And when you look at Rosa Parks, even though you might look at Rosa Parks and say she's mixed, you're going to tell her what part of the bus to sit. That did not change. We are living in segregated Toronto. When you look at North Albion Collegiate and you compare North Albion Collegiate with other schools in the vicinity, mm-hmm. you are geared towards your postal code. Look at all the high-rise building right at Kipling and Dixon area. Mm-hmm. The government knew that they were placing individuals in all those high-rise way before the individuals reach. So through the postal codes, you are still segregated and you know the individual. So even though you might have a mixture of blood, they will actually know and tell you you're a melanated person, you're black still.
So you got to talk a little bit about the postal code thing a little bit
more.
The
postal code is, when you, Eglinton, if you look at, let's say Eglinton and Mali, and your address is Eglinton and Mali, you cannot take that postal code and go into another more affluent school that is prepared for more middle class and upper class. You cannot.
Yeah, because you're linked to the neighborhood that you're in for your
right.
code.
That is carefully done. That is calculated.
So that's a way of. But a lot of people look at that and say, it's just a way of making sure the school service that particular neighborhood, and all the education is across the board is all the same.
Yeah, there would be the justification, but one individual has to see and hear for his or herself. Right, and this is why this type of information is very valid, because we can look carefully. We talk about carding and we talk about what is actually happening in Toronto. These are no phantom topics. This is real. When I came in the 80s, I came in 88. By 89, I was listening to an immigration officer take his badge off to say, "You black nigger, you're nothing else but garbage. You would be deported." It was the first time in rude awakening.
This was in 1988.
Canada, my home and native land, etc. So if you don't have your history, all the ethnic groups you could see, as I said before, in retrospect, religion and culture, they're vehicles, and they're service to a community, actually. And if your religion and your culture is not service to you, you would be left behind in this economic game that had been set up and played out and started with the capitalist system of the slave trade.
Okay, so for somebody, who's listening, who says, all the stuff you're talking about it's a lot. And, what are some of the books that people could read to get some of this information?
Well, we look at Dr. John Henry Clark wrote Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, where you would see a priest, where Rome would even send a priest with Columbus. You have Africa Mother.
So a priest was traveled with
the Santa Maria, the Nina and Pinta ships that we learn about.
Yeah.
You are dehumanizing a people, and this is why even after slavery, you look at the whites in the South saying to Abraham Lincoln, "Let us keep slavery. Let us keep slavery." Abraham Lincoln is saying no. They literally had to, for tax evasion, they had to get into the fact that, okay, we don't want to be taxed on our property, which would be the blacks, because they are not humans, according to them. And they actually, at that time, named us 3/5 of a human.
3/5 of a human.
That's right. That was for tax evasion. But anyhow, let's go back to some of the books.
So
Africa.
So they wouldn't have to pay tax.
That's right. It was tax evasion. Okay. Why do you think they shot Abraham Lincoln behind his head? Are we pretending that we don't know? So come on.
Yeah, you were going to say, sorry.
Yeah, so going back to the books, Africa, Mother of Western Civilization. Who built the pyramids? When they were built? All the theorem that we are actually learning in math, etc. So Yosef Ben Yochanan actually does a classic work in that book, Africa, Mother of Western Civilization.
They say nobody knows who built the pyramids because technologically, in order to build those things, the technology didn't seem to exist at the time.
Yeah, well, the dominant culture will say that, but we have information now around the world. Like, for instance, when you talk about who wrote the Bible, we don't know. Yes, we know. Every piece of historical book has its beginning in regards to who wrote, when did they write, why did they write, etc. We take answers from the dominant culture who thought they would have basically keep us subjugated in slavery. And this is why when Booker T. Washington rose up and came out, basically could not count, so after slavery he actually was destined to teach his people and to educate his people and to write his story. And a beautiful book, Up From Slavery, by Booker T. Washington, a classic reader. We would see exactly where we came from. As a people, we didn't just fall into the Americas. We came with ships. Who built the ships? We didn't just reach into West Africa. We drifted also from North Africa into West, into South. It was not called South Africa. It was called Mona Motapa. Who named it South Africa? Who named it Nigeria that you call Nigeria? They named it. So they had the power of naming and renaming, and these are documented information in even their books. But we followed their curriculum. So we leave university not even studying about the universe, because the 3 pyramids were astrological observatories that black men and women, black women, studied the stars. Those were just astrological observatories. So the thing is, we could stay in the West and talk till thy kingdom come. Is until we get into our history, we would see now that every ethnic group, they actually now are mutations from blacks. Even the Bible said out of one blood came many nations. So the same thing science says, the Bible says. So blacks would have to understand, where did you all come from? You build the pyramids, no alien build the pyramid. Instead of books being written, now aliens build a pyramid. And so give me a break, come
on. What do you think about Black History Month?
I say there's the double sword with Black History Month, right? We borrow the words.
Can you talk a little bit about the history of Black History Month?
Yes, well, in Canada, one of the politicians, there, I think her name was Jane, she pushed for February month because America already had February month as Black History Month. Carter G. Wood, since 1926, they had pushed for it. We
seem to follow the U.S. so much in these things.
In everything. Do you think if there's an invasion, if Russia invades Canada right now, would we think Canada going to say, America, help?
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so the whole emergence of 1 month representing, okay, Black History Month. At least, even though we know that 1 month cannot define us as African people when we are the missing pages of world history. Like Morgan Freeman will argue and say, no, I don't believe in 1 month for African History Month because there's no White History Month. But the thing is, we got to know that they are the dominant culture because they reach in that hegemonic controlled position where they don't want to be measured with 1 month. So all the rest would be subcultures. Like, for instance, you have Filipino America's History Month. You have Women's History Month. You have the LGBT History Month. You have Irish American. You have National Hispanic.
This is in the U.S.?
And this is here and in the U.S.
Oh, really? I've never heard about some of these.
Yeah, you got but you heard about LGBT month with the LGBT community. I know everybody got their month.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
For the Gay Day Parade, everybody got their month.
Yeah, I know they did. They were in around that, but I didn't know that.
You have Native American Heritage Month. You have all those months simply because in sociology we are subcultures. So as subculture, even though we know that technically you're oppressing me by giving me this 1 month, wouldn't I take it? Yes, I will take it. That's like giving Trinidadians pigtail in the days of the slave trade when they ate the big part of the pig and laughed and gave the Trinidadians the pigtail to eat. Same thing they were doing in Jamaica. They were
with
eating
the
the big ox and giving them the ox. So, we would not take it? Of course we're going to take it. So, because we are here as a whole idea, because February month, I'm here. Thank you. You give me the opportunity. So say, let's talk. Otherwise, we walk with our head in the sky. We don't care nothing about our history. So we are thankful for February month still, even though Abraham Lincoln's birthday is the 12th, and you try to the technical things that you try to uphold Abraham. You put that month according to Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and then tell me African History Month. But no, I'm going to still take it because we're going to still get a voice, and we would start somewhere.
But isn't the experience of blacks in Canada very different than the experience in the U.S.?
Yeah, it's different because what we call integration and assimilation is very serious. I mean, look, it's a phenomenon. Because you speak as a Canadian because there's a dominant group would influence you and will socially construct you wherever you are. And this is what I'm saying. If you don't have your history, you would be constantly framed in every level by a dominant.
What I mean by that is, even in Black History Month in Canada, I understand we're following the U.S.'s lead a little bit, which sometimes I have a problem with sometimes. But you don't hear very much about the Canadian experience. We as part of the black community in Canada, we seem to define ourselves as to what's going on south of the border, where in Canada there was slavery at one point in Canada, and it ended sooner in Canada than it did in the U.S., but there's that history that we don't really know about. We hear about the Americans who come up and went to Nova Scotia and some parts of Ontario and these places. We hear little bits and pieces about the American influence in Canada, but there's not a lot of conversation about the quote unquote Canadian black heroes.
Yeah, and I think that we are more pressed whenever people, the minority, sometimes you're more pressed and you tend to lean on the side of, again, the dominant culture. When we look at Canadian history and we look at the first boy African youth coming as a slave from Madagascar, when we look at the hanging of Angelique right here in Canada, I mean, 1834 they abolished slavery here. when Harriet Tubman, when she left, when she was bringing Africans from America into Canada, she left her own husband on the plantation. She said, I could have saved many more slaves, but if they knew that they were slaves.
Oh.
So with us here right now, it's how to reach out and take our history and understand it to the core. Yeah, because as you say, it's limited, very limited. Canada likes to come across all the teachers within the institution as if they're so pious, as if they had no dealings with slavery. It's only because the weather was that bad that they can't, no, seriously.
That it wasn't economically viable.
Just how the North actually ran away from it quickly in the end of the slave trade. That's
thank God for winter. Is there a difference, or should we? How do I put this? Should we define ourselves differently than the American experience, than the Jamaican experience, from the Haitian experience? You know, from the experiences from varies a little bit from what colonies had slavery. Should we? Is it just all just one experience that we all should know that one experience, or does it really matter?
Well, I think personally it should be just one experience. However, we become the victims of our culture. So therefore, we are robbed, and we robbed each other, because back then it had nothing like the Caribbean individual in slavery or the American individual in slavery. Those guys knew that they defined themselves as Africans. As I said, Garvey said, why set up an island when there's a continent? We didn't look through their spectacles. 3 Trinidadians started the own Pan-Africanist movement. They left Trinidad, and we're talking about before Garvey had reached in 1916, to champion the most marvelous sort of venture that ever took place with the liberation of the mines. George Padmore, C.L.R. James, and Sylvester Williams. George Padmore, when he left the very district I was born in Trinidad, Aruca, George Padmore and Sylvester Williams actually emerged from there and went with Kwame Nkrumah to Ghana in 1957 to bring back the independence of Ghana, because Ghana was called Gold Coast by the Europeans, right? Defining ourselves according to the Canadian perspective or the Jamaican perspective or the Trinidadian is only because we are the victims of our culture. But that is something we have to actually now purge away, because when we came on the ships, it was not Jamaican and it was not Trinidadian. Nope. It was not. And take, for instance, when Bookman left Jamaica, because 1/3 of the commerce that went to the Western, that fed the Western world and built the Western world, came from only Jamaica and Haiti. And they would ship one brother from Jamaica plantation into Haiti. And he's the one who was called Bookman, led out in a prayer in the hills, and Haiti went into a 15-year protracted war that actually had Napoleon Bonaparte running with his pants in his hands. And, But the thing is, how could we define ourselves collectively together? That would be beautiful, and it's only information of who we are and where we are going could bring that type of mindset back. But right now we are the victims of our culture.
We've got, I don't know, about 5 minutes left in the show. And so we talked a lot about some books that people could read. We talked about the fact that it's important to know the history because it helps to define who you are as a person, as an individual. What would you say to the individuals that might be listening, that might be saying, all that seems to be great, but it doesn't feel relevant to me today?
Yeah, well, historical amnesia, it would not feel relevant when you're suffering from historical amnesia. But every now and then...
You got to say that again. So it doesn't seem relevant.
Yeah, when you're suffering from historical amnesia, this would not make sense to you. You would not you would be like a snake without its head.
Mm-hmm.
History would not mean anything to you. That's why Garvey said you would be like a tree without its roots. When Garvey came with a fast tempo voice when he came in 1916, met with the head of the KKK and started empowering his people, with this vibrant, high-spirited motivation, he would say, would you do it? Would you do it? If you cannot do it, you're a bunch of lazy, good-for-nothings. And Garvey kept pushing. Out of that, Africa for the Africans, Asia for the Asians, Europe for the Europeans. Amazing. America couldn't believe what was happening. Europe couldn't believe what was happening. 9 million people up to College Street had a Garveyite branch. And you have black physicists coming up, chemists. They want to know what's happening. They had to shut him down. When you know your history, and when you get your history, your mental health rejuvenates to fix yourself. And if we doubt it, just look at your neighbors. Look at our neighbors, and you would see what's causing their drive.
Wow. You touched a little bit on I guess the mental health impact of all of this, and I know that's kind of your field of expertise. Maybe you could, got about another minute or so that maybe you could talk a little bit about that and why it's so relevant.
Yeah, it's the history, as I said in the get-go, when in poetic language, mm-hmm. when Dr. Clark used the words, it's a clock. History is a clock that will tell you your political, religious, and cultural time of the day. It could be used as a compass for people to find themselves on a map of human geography. It tells the people where they've been and what they've been. When they interviewed Muhammad Ali, Dr. Clark asked him, Dr. Clark, Muhammad, so after so long, what would you say to us as a people? He said, I'm still a nigger. I'm still a nigger. And he realized in the end that when you serve a nation, no matter how you want to serve another nation, if you don't know who you are and find yourself, you're constantly put into that place. Mental health brings you into a healthy cognitive awareness. It's only 3 levels one could be governed. You can bring the best of psychiatrists. Mm-hmm. Cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. What you think, how you feel, and what you do. There's no other place to go. Family, life, leisure, community, self, school, or work. And that's the type of work that I'm into when I do mental health and supportive counseling within my practice. And history is a part of it because history gives you your identity and it gives you drive of who you are as an individual and where you came from. Not knowing who your mother is, mm-hmm. It's not healthy when everyone else would have a mother to at least identify with.
Wow. You've been listening to my conversation today with Derek Williams, and I do appreciate you for coming and being on the show with us today, with me today, and appreciate everyone who's spent the time listening to us today. It's been very informative, and as you said, if we continue to, I guess, embrace our culture and dig into our history and get to know ourselves a little bit better, then it's definitely something that would help us to be able to understand where we're going when we understand where we've come from. Thank everyone for listening today, and we'll be back next week when we're going to be talking about a little bit lighter topic. We're going to be talking about poetry and love. Got a couple of poets that are going to be on the show and talking about the poetry scene within the Toronto area. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great Super Bowl Sunday, and whatever team you're hoping for, I hope that they win. Thank you.
Vibes and Vinyl is here every Friday live at 8 p.m. on iLiveRadio.com. Formerly of Toronto's FM radio airwaves, DJs Gene King and Ray Prasad are in the house once again to continue their tradition, promoting great house music to the world. You will hear exclusive releases and sometimes traveling back in time via some of the best disco, soul, funk, and house. So keep it locked and enjoy the ride.